The Magical Hourglass. Finn Mason was an ordinary boy in an extraordinary world. At 13, he wasn't a hero, a wizard, or even particularly brave. His small town of Crestwood wasn't known for much, just a sleepy community surrounded by rolling hills and dense forests. Yet it was in these very woods that Finn's life would change forever. It began on a crisp autumn afternoon. Finn had ventured into the woods to escape the monotony of homework and chores. The forest had always been his refuge, a place where time seemed to slow and the humdrum of daily life faded into the rustling leaves and bird songs. But that day, something was different. The air felt heavier, almost charged, and a faint golden light shimmered through the trees. Curiosity piqued. Finn followed the light deeper into the forest. He stumbled upon an ancient oak tree, its roots gnarled and twisted like the fingers of a giant. At its base, partially hidden by moss and leaves, lay a small wooden box. Finn knelt and carefully opened it, revealing an intricately carved hourglass nestled inside. The hourglass was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Its frame was gilded with swirling patterns that seemed to shift when touched by light. The sand inside was a luminous gold, flowing slowly from one chamber to the other, though Finn couldn't tell where the sand began or ended. The entire object pulsed faintly, as if alive. As he held the hourglass, a strange warmth spread through Finn's fingers. The air around him shimmered, and he suddenly felt dizzy, as if the ground had dropped away. The forest grew eerily quiet. Back home, Finn examined his discovery under his desk lamp. The hourglass didn't seem particularly heavy, but its presence felt significant. As he turned it over in his hands, he noticed tiny symbols etched along the edges. Symbols he couldn't read but felt compelled to understand. Unable to contain his curiosity, Finn tipped the hourglass. The golden sand began to flow, but instead of simply moving from one chamber to the other, it seemed to expand, filling the room with a soft, golden glow. For a moment, Finn's heart raced with fear. Had he triggered something dangerous? But before he could react, the world around him blurred. When the light faded, Finn found himself standing in the middle of the woods again. Except it wasn't the same. The ancient oak was now a young sapling, its trunk thin and fragile. The air smelled fresher, untouched by time. Crestwood, visible through a break in the trees, looked smaller, quieter, and older. It took a moment for the realization to hit him. The hourglass hadn't just transported him to another place, it had taken him back in time. His excitement quickly turned to apprehension. How far back had he gone? Could he return? Finn clutched the hourglass tightly and tipped it again. The sand began to flow in reverse, and once more, the golden light enveloped him. When the light faded, Finn was back in his room. Everything was as he'd left it. He let out a shaky breath and stared at the hourglass. It wasn't just a trinket, it was a time machine. Over the next few days, Finn couldn't stop thinking about the hourglass. He began experimenting, taking small trips back in time, a few minutes here, an hour there. Each time, he returned with a growing understanding of the object's power. He learned to control the duration by focusing on the flow of sand, though the effort left him drained. Yet, the thrill of bending time outweighed his exhaustion. But not all his experiments were harmless. On one trip, Finn accidentally spilled a cup of water in the kitchen moments before his mom walked in. She slipped and bruised her arm. Though he was able to reverse the event with the hourglass, it was a sobering reminder of the danger he wielded. Time wasn't just a toy, it was fragile. One evening, as Finn contemplated the hourglass's potential, a news broadcast caught his attention. A breaking report showed images of a secret research facility destroyed by a catastrophic explosion. The anchor explained that the facility had been studying volatile energy sources, and a miscalculation had caused the disaster. The fallout from the explosion was spreading rapidly, threatening to destabilize the surrounding region. Finn's stomach dropped. He recognized the location. It was less than 50 miles from Crestwood. Though his town wasn't in immediate danger, the idea of such destruction felt personal. He couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, as he lay in bed, a wild idea took root in his mind. If the hourglass could take him back in time, maybe he could stop the disaster before it happened. But as quickly as the idea excited him, A darker thought crept in. What if something went wrong? What if he made things worse? His internal debate was interrupted by a faint noise outside his window. At first, he thought it was the wind, but then he saw the silhouette, a figure cloaked in shadow, moving stealthily toward his house. Finn froze. The figure stopped at his window, peering in before retreating into the night. He clutched the hourglass instinctively, his heart pounding. Someone else knew about it. The next morning, Finn couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At school, a stranger in a dark suit stood by the gates, scanning the students as they passed. On his way home, he noticed a black van idling near the woods. The hourglass, tucked safely in his backpack, seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. By the time he reached his room, Finn realized the truth. He wasn't the only one interested in the hourglass, and whoever these people were, they wouldn't stop until they had it. Clutching the hourglass tightly, Finn whispered to himself, "If I'm going to stop the disaster, I have to act fast. Time is running out." The stranger, outside his window, and the ominous black van had shaken Finn to his core. He knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. His discovery of the hourglass had drawn attention, and not the good kind. Whoever was after him seemed to know exactly what they were looking for, and they weren't going to stop. The next morning, Finn packed the hourglass carefully in his school bag and decided to lay low. He avoided his usual routes and kept his head down in class, but his mind was racing. The news about the research facility explosion replayed in his head like a broken record. If he could go back in time and stop the accident, he might not only save lives, but also eliminate the need for anyone to seek out the hourglass. By lunchtime, he'd made up his mind. He would take the hourglass to the site of the explosion before it happened. He just needed to figure out when and how. After school, Finn snuck out of the house and headed to the town library, a place he rarely visited. It was quiet and safe, and most importantly, no one would think to look for him there. He found a dusty corner with books about the local area and the research facility. As he sifted through old maps and articles, he learned that the facility had been operational for years, but kept most of its work highly classified. It wasn't until he stumbled upon a recent newspaper that he found the crucial detail he needed, the exact time of the explosion. It had occurred 2 days earlier at precisely 3:47 p.m. Finn's heart raced. If he could arrive an hour before, he might have enough time to prevent the catastrophe. But the question lingered, what would he do once he got there? He was just a kid with no authority or knowledge of science. Yet, he couldn't ignore the weight of responsibility pressing on him. The hourglass had chosen him, and with it came the power to change the future. That night, Finn locked his bedroom door and prepared for the journey. He tipped the hourglass carefully, focusing on the golden sand as it began to flow. The light filled his room again, brighter than ever, and Finn felt the now familiar pull as the world around him blurred. When the glow faded, he was standing in a clearing just outside the facility's gates. The air was crisp and quiet, with none of the chaos he'd seen on the news. He glanced at his watch. 2:45 p.m. 1 hour until disaster struck. Finn hesitated, unsure of his next move. He crept toward the gates, the facility's towering walls looming over him. A security guard patrolled nearby, and Finn ducked behind a bush, clutching the hourglass tightly. He needed a way in, but sneaking into a high-security facility wasn't exactly in his skill set. Just as he was weighing his options, a voice startled him. "You're not supposed to be here." Finn spun around to see a girl about his age, her sharp blue eyes studying him suspiciously. She wore a dark hoodie and had a confident stance that suggested she wasn't easily intimidated. "Ah," Finn stammered. "I could say the same about you." The girl raised an eyebrow. "You don't exactly look like security. What are you doing here?" Finn hesitated. He didn't know if he could trust her, but he needed help. "I'm here to stop something bad from happening. You wouldn't believe me if I told you." She crossed her arms. "Try me." Finn sighed and pulled out the hourglass, its golden glow faint in the waning light. The girl's eyes widened and her confident demeanor faltered. You have it," she whispered. "The hourglass of ages." "You know about this?" Finn asked, surprised. The girl nodded. "My name's Eliza. I've been tracking it for weeks. My family's been studying it for generations, It's powerful, dangerous, and it's not supposed to be in the hands of just anyone. Well, lucky me, Finn muttered. Listen, I need to stop the explosion here. If I don't, people will die. Eliza's expression grew serious. That explosion is no accident. Someone inside the facility is tampering with unstable energy sources. If they succeed, the fallout won't just destroy this place, it'll ripple across the region. Finn's stomach dropped. Then we have to stop them. Eliza nodded. Agreed, but we'll need a plan. The two crept along the perimeter of the facility, finding an unguarded side entrance. Eliza seemed to know her way around, guiding Finn through the dimly lit hallways. They passed laboratories filled with strange equipment and rooms lined with monitors displaying streams of data. Finally, they reached a control room. Inside, a man in a lab coat stood at a console, typing furiously. His face was tense, and wires snaked around a glowing device on the table, an unstable energy core pulsing with an ominous light. That's it, Eliza whispered. If we disrupt the core, we might stop the chain reaction. But how? Finn whispered back. I don't know anything about this stuff. Eliza reached into her backpack and pulled out a small device. This should scramble the core's calibration and shut it down temporarily, but we'll have to act fast. Finn nodded, his heart pounding. As Eliza crept toward the console, Finn kept watch, clutching the hourglass in case they needed to escape. Suddenly, the man turned, his eyes narrowing as he spotted Eliza. Who are you? He barked, stepping toward her. You shouldn't be here. Eliza froze, but Finn acted on instinct. He tipped the hourglass and the golden light filled the room. Time slowed, and the man's movements became sluggish, like a figure trapped in molasses. Hurry, Finn urged, his voice echoing strangely in the slowed-down world. Eliza snapped out of her shock and scrambled to attach the device to the core. It beeped faintly, and the core's glow dimmed, its pulsing light fading. Finn tipped the hourglass again, returning time to normal. The man lunged for them, but Eliza yanked Finn's arm, and they bolted out of the room. Alarms blared, and voices echoed through the hallways as they raced toward the exit. Outside, Finn and Eliza collapsed in the clearing, gasping for breath. The facility stood intact, the disaster averted, for now. You did it, Finn said, clutching the hourglass. We stopped it. Eliza nodded, but her expression was grim. For now. But whoever's behind this won't stop, and they'll come for the hourglass next. Finn looked at her, determination hardening his resolve. Then we'll make sure they don't get it. Finn and Eliza sat in the clearing, the weight of their actions settling on their shoulders. The facility was safe for now, but Eliza's warning lingered in the air. Whoever wanted the hourglass and the power it held was still out there, and they wouldn't stop until they got it. As they planned their next move, the sound of distant engines caught their attention. Finn looked up, heart pounding, to see 3 black SUVs speeding toward the facility. Dust clouds rose in their wake as the vehicles screeched to a halt near the gates. Eliza's face tightened. That's them. Whoever they are, they've been tracking the hourglass longer than I have. We have to get out of here. Finn clutched the hourglass tighter. What do they want with it? Eliza's voice was grim. The hourglass doesn't just control time. It's tied to something ancient, something bigger than we understand. In the wrong hands, it could rewrite reality. Finn's blood ran cold. Rewriting reality? Like making the world end? Eliza nodded. Or worse. The pair retreated into the woods, their footsteps muffled by the undergrowth. Finn's mind raced with questions, but the urgency of the situation kept him moving. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a small cave nestled at the base of a hill. Eliza motioned for Finn to follow her inside. The cave was damp and dark, but it provided much-needed shelter. Eliza pulled out a flashlight and shone it on a crumpled map she retrieved from her backpack. We need to get to the sanctuary, she said. It's the only place the hourglass can be protected. The sanctuary? Finn asked, catching his breath. What is it? Eliza hesitated. A hidden place built centuries ago by the same people who created the hourglass. It's warded against anyone trying to use its power for destruction. Finn frowned. So why didn't they keep the hourglass there? They did, Eliza replied, until it was stolen decades ago. Since then, it's been passed around, hidden, and forgotten. Until now. Before they could continue their conversation, voices echoed through the woods. Flashlights danced in the distance, growing closer with every second. Finn's heart sank. They'd been found. "We need to move," Eliza hissed, grabbing her pack. They bolted out of the cave and into the dense forest, branches scraping at their arms and faces. Finn glanced over his shoulder and saw shadowy figures closing in, their shouts carrying through the trees. Panic gripped him as he stumbled, nearly dropping the hourglass. "Here!" Eliza pulled him toward a fallen log. They ducked behind it, holding their breath as their pursuers fanned out, searching the area. Finn's grip on the hourglass tightened. "We're not going to make it," he whispered. Eliza's eyes darted to the hourglass. "You have to use it." Finn shook his head. "I can't, if I get it wrong." "Finn," Eliza interrupted, her voice steady, "if they catch us, they'll take it, and then it won't matter what happens next." Her words struck a chord. With trembling hands, Finn tipped the hourglass. The golden sand began to flow, and the world around them shimmered and froze. The shouting stopped, the flashlights froze mid-beam, and even the leaves in the trees hung suspended in the air. Time had stopped. Finn and Eliza scrambled to their feet, weaving through the frozen figures. It was eerie, like walking through a photograph, but there was no time to dwell on it. Finn could feel the strain of the hourglass's power, a deep exhaustion pulling at him. He didn't know how long he could hold it. They ran till they reached the edge of the forest, where a narrow dirt road wound through the hills. Eliza pointed to an old, rusted pickup truck parked nearby. "We can take that." Finn hesitated. "What if it doesn't start?" Eliza smirked. "It's better than waiting for them to catch up." They climbed into the truck, and Eliza quickly hot-wired the engine. As soon as Finn tipped the hourglass again, releasing its hold on time, the world roared back to life. The truck's engine sputtered to life just as the voices behind them resumed, growing louder. "Go, go, go!" Finn shouted. The tires kicked up dirt as Eliza sped down the road, leaving the forest and their pursuers behind. The journey to the sanctuary was long and tense. Eliza navigated using her map, guiding them through remote backroads and overgrown trails. Finn kept glancing at the hourglass, its golden glow a constant reminder of its power and danger. As dawn broke, they arrived at the base of a mountain. Eliza pointed to a hidden path winding up the slope. "The sanctuary's at the top," Finn groaned. "You're kidding." "No time to complain," Eliza said, already climbing out of the truck. They began the ascent, the weight of exhaustion and fear pressing on them. By the time they reached the summit, the sun was high in the sky, casting light on a crumbling stone temple, the sanctuary. Inside, the temple was eerily quiet. Ancient carvings lined the walls, depicting scenes of time being shaped like clay. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, its surface etched with the same symbols as the hourglass. "This is it," Eliza said, her voice reverent. "Place it here." Finn hesitated, the weight of the hourglass heavier than ever. "What happens next?" Eliza placed a hand on his shoulder. "It will be safe here. The sanctuary will seal it away so no one can use it again." Finn nodded, his heart heavy. He stepped forward and placed the hourglass on the pedestal. The moment he let go, the symbols on the pedestal lit up, and the hourglass began to glow brighter. A golden barrier of light surrounded it, humming softly. "It's done," Eliza said, a small smile breaking through her exhaustion. "The hourglass is where it belongs." As they left the temple, Finn felt a strange mix of relief and loss. The hourglass had been a burden, but it had also given him purpose. He glanced at Eliza. "What now?" she shrugged. "We keep moving. There's always something out there worth protecting." Finn smiled faintly. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time he felt ready to face it. Together, they descended the mountain, leaving the hourglass and its dangerous power safely behind.